Are you one of many who has wondered about how Kevin Franke could have walked away from his children or how any father could walk away from their children? Well, this is an episode you'll not want to miss because there is a newly filed lawsuit against Jodi Hildebrandt, and it offers a rare and detailed look into what Kevin Franke claims he endured. It's a rare, detailed glimpse into what Kevin says really happened, and it could change the way you see this case entirely. After Ruby Franke's two youngest children were rescued from Jodi Hildebrandt's home, the details revealed a disturbing picture of abuse and manipulation, all hidden behind the facade of religion, therapy, and self-help. Soon others came forward with their own stories about Jodi, people who trusted her as a therapist and spiritual guide, only to be psychologically controlled and their lives destroyed. Despite mounting evidence and firsthand accounts, many still struggle to understand how parents like Ruby and Kevin Franke could allow someone like Jodi to hurt their children. Most parents are fiercely protective. We want to believe that we'd recognize danger before it could tear our family apart. Yet, even after documentaries, Kevin's interview, and expert opinions on brainwashing and coercive control, people still question how Kevin could let such cruelty unfold in his own family. Kevin claims that by the time things reached its darkest point, he was no longer in the home, shut out, and powerless. He claims Jodi had broken him down so deeply, he couldn't see a way out or recognize how far things had gone. And now, in a significant addition to these claims, Kevin Franke and his legal team have filed a new 15-page lawsuit against Jodi Hildebrandt. The allegations center around negligence in mental health treatment, but they also offer deeper insight into the psychological tactics Jodi allegedly used, tactics that may explain how the Franke family and others suffered under her control. So stay with us as we break down what this lawsuit reveals and what it could mean moving forward. There is a lot to unpack. So the first part of the lawsuit lays out some foundational background. It explains that Jodi Hildebrandt was a licensed mental health therapist, officially registered as a clinical mental health counselor. But that license was revoked by the Utah Division of Professional Licensing on May 10th, 2024. Kevin Franke is now seeking damages exceeding $300,000 and has fulfilled all pre-litigation requirements under the Utah Healthcare Malpractice Act. So the next part of the lawsuit gives some background on Kevin and Ruby's relationship and how Jodi Hildebrandt entered the picture. So it says that Kevin and Ruby were married on December 28th, 2000, and together they had 6 children. These children are Sherry, Chad, AF, JF, RF, and EF. The document also points out that Ruby has never been licensed or certified to provide any kind of professional services, meaning she wasn't trained as a therapist or counselor in any official way. The lawsuit claims Kevin got to know Jodi through Ruby since the two of them had a close personal and business relationship. So before everything unraveled in 2022, according to the lawsuit, Jodi brought Ruby in to work with her on a Facebook group she created called Moms of Truth. At the time, Jodi was still a practicing mental health counselor. Jodi regularly featured Ruby in social media content to promote her counseling business, Connections with an X. She was also selling and distributing written materials related to her work, presenting herself as a trusted mental health professional. Well, that all came to a halt on August 30th, 2023, when Jodi was arrested and charged with abusing several of Kevin and Ruby's children. And before her arrest, Jodi repeatedly told Kevin and Ruby, both in conversations and through her written material, that she was a licensed mental health professional. She talked up her credentials, her reputation, and her education, making it clear she was licensed as a clinical mental health counselor in Utah. She also pitched her services and promoted the books and workbooks she had written, which Kevin and Ruby ended up purchasing. These materials also listed her professional credentials, including her Utah license. The documents state that Jodi often referred to herself, though, as a psychologist. Yeah, just like Dr. John, my co-host, a psychologist, which made Kevin and Ruby believe that was her actual title. Let me be clear, you cannot be a psychologist without a doctorate in psychology. The lawsuit even points to her police interrogation video from August 30th, 2023, as proof of her making that claim that she's a psychologist. Take a listen.
The whole reason we're sitting here today is there's a lot of questions we have that we just maybe misunderstandings that we just need to clarify.
I know, and I'd love to tell you if you were here, because I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with what I say. You know, I'm a psychologist. I've watched people flip things all the time. So I get it. I sit on your side. I get it.
So in the spring of 2022, Jodi told Kevin that based on her supposed experience, education, and expertise as a licensed mental health counselor and psychologist, she had diagnosed Kevin with a long list of serious issues. So according to Jodi, in this lawsuit, Kevin was lustful, narcissistic, manipulative, deceptive, controlling, and selfish. But here's the thing. She made these claims without doing any kind of proper assessment, testing, or formal diagnosis. Again, as you know from our program and from our podcast, Dr. John explains all of the testing, all of the assessments, everything you would have to do to diagnose somebody with these types of things. That wasn't done according to this lawsuit and what Kevin Franke is saying. And Jodi didn't stop there. Jodi also shared this so-called diagnosis with Ruby, convincing Ruby it was true that this is what her husband suffered with. She then persuaded Ruby to go along with her version of events and to follow her guidance, Jodi's guidance, for what she called remedial treatment, not just for Kevin, but for the whole family. Kevin agreed to work with Jodi, believing she was acting in a professional capacity. And at that point, according to this lawsuit, she officially began providing him mental health services, placing herself in a position of serious responsibility and trust as a licensed healthcare provider in the state of Utah. Jodi's so-called professional advice went even further. Jodi actually told Kevin that because of his alleged emotional and mental health issues, he should have no contact at all with his children. She claimed his presence could negatively impact them and might even cause them to develop the same problems that Jodi said Kevin had. Jodi framed this as part of Kevin's treatment plan. And then on July 20th, 2022, Jodi and Ruby took it a step further. And they told Kevin and their oldest son, Chad, Kevin and Ruby's oldest son, Chad, who was 17 at the time, that they both needed to leave the family home. According to Jodi and Ruby, this separation was necessary to protect the other children and to preserve the family. Not only were Kevin and Chad told to leave, but they were also told to cut off all communication with the rest of the family, including Ruby. So at that point, both Kevin and Chad were paying Jodi for her services. Kevin had also enrolled in her online men's therapy group, trusting Jodi's credentials, education, and professional license. And with Ruby fully supporting Jodi's guidance, Kevin and Chad followed her advice. They moved out of the home and cut off contact just as Jodi had instructed. So according to the lawsuit, Jodi found out that Kevin and Chad were living together after leaving the family home, and she was not happy. So she told them they actually needed to separate immediately. In Jodi's view, them staying together would only make things worse. So she wanted to completely isolate them, according to this lawsuit. She claimed they'd enable each other's bad behavior and that being around one another would just continue the issues that she had diagnosed without assessment or testing. So Jodi insisted that Chad and Kevin not only stay apart from their family, but from each other as well, completely isolate them. She ordered them to cut off all contact, even though they were father and son. And at the same time, Chad was paying for weekly therapy sessions with Jodi at just 17 years old, and she had actually raised his fee to around $900 a month. Kevin was also paying for his own spot in Jodi's online men's therapy group, which started back in July of 2022. Jodi asked Kevin to pay through Venmo, saying it was easier, and he ended up paying between $300 and $375 each month just to participate in group sessions, not even one-on-one therapy, group sessions. Sometimes Jodi was there, sometimes she wasn't. And the document states that Jodi knew a lot about the Franke family, including their deep devotion to their faith, their LDS or Mormon faith, and their commitment to marriage and family. So again, according to this lawsuit, Jodi used that knowledge to manipulate Kevin. Jodi knew how important Kevin's religious beliefs were to him, and she used that against him. He was paying her for what he believed was legitimate professional therapy, all in hopes of saving his marriage to Ruby and keeping his family together. But instead, Jodi twisted those values to gain control. Jodi told Kevin that unless he followed her instructions exactly, his soul was at risk of being damned. And it didn't stop there. During his separation from the family, Jodi reportedly had other men in her online therapy group join in the pressure and peer pressure. These men, under Jodi's direction, warned Kevin that if he didn't change fast enough, Ruby was going to lose patience and divorce him. So peer pressure, if you don't do this, Kevin, then, you're going to get divorced. The lawsuit continues. So this created a constant sense of fear in Kevin, fear that if he didn't obey Jodi completely, 100%, he'd lose his family, his faith, and everything he was trying to protect. It kept him locked in, believing he had no choice but to comply with whatever Jodi said. And while Jodi was forcing Kevin to stay completely cut off from Ruby and the kids, she was also emotionally and mentally abusing other clients who broke her so-called no contact rule. According to the lawsuit, if any man in her program tried to reach out to his wife or children, Jodi would accuse him of being selfish and disrespectful, saying it showed he didn't value his marriage or honor his wife's wishes. In those cases, Jodi would often advise the wife to consider divorce. That's an odd thing for a therapist to do, by the way, if what this lawsuit says is true. Hey, by the way, maybe you should divorce him. Probably a line a therapist shouldn't cross, but let's continue. There were only 2 times, according to this lawsuit, when Jodi actually encouraged Kevin to communicate directly with Ruby. One was in February of 2023, and the other came after he was fired from his professor job at Brigham Young University in June of 2023. But even then, the communication wasn't healthy or supportive. Both times, Jodi instructed Kevin to write letters to Ruby, his wife, not letters of reconciliation or understanding, but letters of confessions. Jodi told Kevin to list out everything he had done that she had labeled as selfish, narcissistic, lustful, entitled, or manipulative. Jodi then told Ruby to hold on to these confession letters, not to work on the marriage, but to use these letters as leverage in case Ruby decided to file for divorce. So she literally got Kevin to give Ruby leverage in a divorce, according to this lawsuit. And between August of 2022 and August of 2023, while Kevin was participating in Jodi's online men's therapy group, the lawsuit says she was extremely mentally abusive towards him. She berated and belittled him, and in addition to calling him manipulative, deceptive, controlling, narcissistic, lustful, and selfish, she accused him of being a, quote, lover of darkness, end quote. She said that he was a lover of Satan, that's also in quotes, and claimed that he was hiding, in quotes, something very dark and evil, end quote. Jodi refused to offer Kevin help or counseling unless he confessed to whatever the supposed darkness was. But Kevin says he had no idea what Jodi was even talking about. Still, Jodi insisted there was something Kevin was hiding and used that confusion against him, pushing him to admit to things he didn't understand just to appease Jodi. Kevin even asked for private one-on-one sessions so he could work through these issues more directly, which, by the way, would be a typical thing for a licensed therapist to do with someone. A one-on-one session is probably what she should be doing. But rather than accepting this, Jodi refused one-on-one sessions. Instead, she told Kevin to talk it out with other men in this online men's group, in her group, men she was also coaching under these same manipulative methods. And again, according to this lawsuit, over the course of more than 300 hours of group therapy sessions, Jodi's behavior became even more disturbing. According to the lawsuit, during these sessions, she would privately message other group members sharing confidential details about Kevin, including personal struggles, family issues, and sensitive information he had shared in therapy. She then instructed those group members to use that information to mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually attack Kevin. They would, quote, call him out in front of the group, accusing him of inappropriate behavior or comments, end quote, all under Jodi's direction. But it didn't stop there, according to this lawsuit. While treating Kevin, Jodi also shared graphic and personal details about her other patients' lives and choices. That's shocking. That is a major breach of trust and confidentiality. Instead of a safe, supportive environment, these sessions were becoming a tool for control, public shaming, and psychological manipulation. In September of 2022, Jodi delivered another blow to Kevin Franke, one that struck at the core of his faith. She told him, according to this lawsuit, that he was not worthy to hold an LDS temple recommend, which is required to enter the temple for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And for Kevin, who believed he had been living in accordance with the standards of his faith, this cut deeply. Jodi's words had such a strong impact that when it came time for him to renew his LDS temple recommend in 2023, Kevin didn't go to the meeting. And by then, Jodi had convinced him that trying to renew it would make him a hypocrite, that he was unworthy and unfit to serve in the temple. Well, she didn't stop there. Jodi also told Kevin that getting fired from Brigham Young University, that is a church-owned university, LDS Church owns Brigham Young University, and this is where he worked, that getting fired from there would actually be the best thing for Kevin. She said it would help his recovery, that maybe losing his job would finally wake him up because, let me point out that since this is a church-owned university and a private university, if a professor doesn't have a temple recommend, he would lose his job. And in Jodi's words, men like Kevin weren't worthy to work at BYU. And because he didn't renew his temple recommend, Kevin was eventually fired in June of 2023, since holding a current, again, temple recommend was required for employment at this private university. But instead of offering support, Jodi scolded Kevin. She told him the job loss was his own fault, called it unnecessary, and used it as more proof that Kevin was, in her words, a selfish person. What Kevin didn't know was that from about mid-May 2023 until August 30th, 2023, Jodi had Ruby and their children living at her home in Ivins, Utah. We know this because this is where police found them. And she never told Kevin this, though, according to this lawsuit. And while she was treating Kevin, and I mean Jodi, when Jodi was treating Kevin and charging him for counseling services that were supposed to help reunite the family, Jodi was actually secretly isolating and abusing his children behind his back. In fact, during this time, she was even advising Ruby to get tested for STDs. So while her official goal was to bring the family back together, in reality, Jodi was driving a wedge between them, according to this lawsuit, keeping Kevin and his family apart and causing more harm than help. During the same time, as part of her efforts to break up the family, Jodi convinced Ruby to start making plans to buy a piece of property in Arizona. To fund this, Jodi persuaded Ruby to cash out financial accounts that belonged to Ruby, Kevin, and their children, about $80,000 in total. The plan was for Jodi and Ruby to move to this new property out of state in Arizona, taking the children with them. And as a side note, we do know this from police reports and what we know about the abuse and what happened there and their charges. And I can only imagine what would have happened, by the way, if they were able to move to Arizona out of state. What would have happened to those children that were being abused? But nonetheless, let's go back to this lawsuit. So back to the lawsuit. This purchase wasn't for the family's benefit, this Arizona property. It was for Jodi's own gain, coming at the expense of her patient. And all of this happened while Jodi was officially providing counseling to Kevin, supposedly with the goal of reuniting the family that she was actually isolating, abusing, and planning to separate even further by moving them out of state. And amid everything going on, during Kevin's last men's group session on July 26, 2023, Jodi suddenly announced she was immediately suspending Kevin's therapy sessions with her. She told him that God had instructed her that Kevin needed absolute solitude to heal. She said Kevin was to be completely isolated with no communication except with God. Jodi warned Kevin that if he broke this isolation, it would almost certainly cost him his marriage and family. At the same time, while Kevin was cut off and isolated, Jodi had his wife Ruby and their children living in her home. And behind the scenes, Jodi was engaged in criminal behavior, severely abusing Kevin's children emotionally, mentally, and physically. This evidence, this abuse and evidence is part of the official court records, including photos and statements from Jodi's criminal case. Ultimately, Jodi was convicted and sentenced to prison for these crimes. This lawsuit lays out a series of serious claims against Jodi Hildebrandt, accusing her of failing and falling far below the standard of care expected from a mental health professional. These allegations include, are you ready? Failing to properly diagnose Kevin's mental health condition or explain how her diagnosis justified the treatment she provided. Using unprofessional, inappropriate, or even harmful methods of treatment. Misdiagnosing Kevin's condition on purpose. Having conflicting relationships with Kevin, his family, and other patients, which is unethical. Acting against the best interests of Kevin's children, even though her job was supposed to help the family. Committing criminal acts against Kevin's children. Sharing Kevin's private information with his wife, Ruby, going against Kevin's best interests. Being dishonest and acting primarily for Jodi's own benefit, not Kevin's well-being. Claiming to practice psychology without being licensed to do so. Engaging in behavior that led to her license being suspended and eventually revoked by the Utah Licensing Board. Showing gross incompetence and negligence in her professional work. Practicing under false or misleading pretenses. And finally, verbally, physically, mentally, or sexually abusing or exploiting people connected to her work. All of this together paints a picture of serious misconduct, both professionally and criminally, that deeply impacted Kevin and his family. The next part of the lawsuit explains the types of injuries and damages Kevin has suffered as a result of Jodi's actions, and these include being subjected to unnecessary and harmful mental health treatments and advice, all while paying for those services, financial damages covering the cost of past, ongoing, and future mental health care needed to heal from the damage, general damages for physical and emotional pain, anxiety, depression, loss of enjoyment of life, and other limitations, including injuries that might still show up later, linked to the abuse and mistreatment of Kevin, his wife, and children. Costs for attorney fees, therapy, lost income, and out-of-pocket expenses Kevin and his family have had to deal with to respond to and try to fix the harm done. Expenses related to rebuilding and restoring his family, including the long process of getting his children out of state custody, which lasted nearly 20 months and was a direct result of Jodi's criminal and unprofessional conduct. And finally, any other damages the court thinks are appropriate. The lawsuit claims that all of these injuries and damages were caused directly by Jodi's negligent and harmful actions toward Kevin and his family. So now, let's break down the first cause of action in the lawsuit, negligence. Kevin repeats all of the allegations we've already talked about and says that Jodi owed him a duty of care as her patient. And because Kevin was in a vulnerable emotional state, Jodi held a position of trust over him. I do agree with this. But instead of protecting and helping Kevin claims that she breached the duty of using improper and harmful mental health techniques, like we've discussed earlier. In the prayer for relief, which is basically what Kevin is asking the court to do, he wants compensation for all damages he's entitled to under Utah law, payment for economic damages like medical bills and lost income, which will be proven at trial, payment for non-economic damages, including emotional pain and suffering, prejudgment interest, money that accumulates from the time the harm happened until the judgment, attorney fees and court costs, and any other relief the court thinks is fair. Finally, Kevin has requested a jury trial, meaning he wants a group of citizens to hear the case and decide the outcome as allowed by Utah's rules. And I'm here for it. Bring on the jury trial. This newly filed lawsuit against Jodi Hildebrandt offers a rare and detailed look into what Kevin Franke says he endured, a perspective many may not have fully considered before. Of course, there will still be people who think that Kevin should have been stronger, that he should have protected his family and stood up to Jodi before she could cause so much damage. A common perspective, as he was his young children's last line of defense, and then he walked away. But the allegations in this suit suggest a far more complex reality, one involving psychological control, manipulation, and fear at the hands of someone who presented herself as a trusted professional. What emerges is a chilling reminder of the danger when someone in a respected role, especially one that blends therapy with spiritual guidance, abuses that position. In this case, Hildebrandt wasn't seen by some merely as a therapist. She was viewed almost as a spiritual leader. She certainly saw herself as that, giving her a powerful hold over those seeking help. And that combination of influence and authority can become a weapon when used to isolate, control, and manipulate. The case underscores the need for safeguards in churches, institutions, and families when recommending anyone to counsel others through emotional or spiritual struggles. Without oversight, the very people meant to heal can become the ones causing the deepest harm. Let me know your thoughts and comments. Do you see Kevin Franke as a victim? Has your opinion changed at all after learning more about this lawsuit? And as far as Hidden True Crime goes, we'll continue following this story and lawsuit wherever it leads.